Plus, newly elected Auditor General Takani Maluleke will today present the second special report on the management of government's COVID-19 relief funds. You might remember the last report we received was certainly a cause for concern, and that's just one way of putting it. In a related matter now, the COVID-19 pandemic has severely disrupted the lives of young people across the world. Viacom CBS has conducted a global consumer insight study to try and ascertain and measure the extent of this impact. The survey was titled Beyond 2020, Global Youth Voices and Futures, and looks at how the pandemic and the lockdown rules have in fact hit the lives of young people who've had to forego events such as graduation ceremonies, matric dances, and even just normal schooling. 8,000 young people across 15 countries, including South Africa, were surveyed. 9 out of 10 say many of their future plans have been disrupted, while 87% say 2020 has made them kind of rethink what they want to do with their lives. To speak to the survey and what perhaps we can make of these findings, let's bring in Senior Vice President and General Manager for Viacom CBS Network in Africa, and that's Monde Twala. Monde, thanks very much for your time. Welcome to the AM Report. We'll get to the findings of the survey in just a moment. For those who are wondering what interest you have in ascertaining what young people are doing, just take us through the work you do and why this matters to you.
Good morning to everyone. Good morning, Africa. I think the work that we do, obviously through our youth brands, MTV Base, BET, we do these studies across the world because it's important for us to engage with young people, get an understanding of where they are, and we did this global study to really explore youth perspectives, particularly focused on the age group of 16 to 24-year-olds, really looking at how the recent events, how the pandemic has impacted their dreams, their plans, their beliefs, and of course their attitudes. And particularly interesting key takeouts from a South African perspective is quite positive, because it's showing that a lot of young people have, despite the challenges they faced over this year, they're pretty much positive about really coming out and pushing their dreams and aspirations.
Right, and it was 8,000 young people from across 15 countries, and perhaps we shouldn't really be surprised that there's a sense of optimism, because the sense I get is that young people are not necessarily averse to uncertainty, and that's certainly one of the things COVID-19 has brought along.
Absolutely, I think for us from a business perspective, from an engagement perspective with young people, what we consistently trying to do is really look at what's on top of their minds, what's impacting on them, whether it's the NSARS activism that we've seen in Nigeria, whether it's Black Lives Matter issues that we've seen obviously in the US. Young people want to be, they want to shape the future, they want to shape the environment, and we're seeing an amazing social activism in communities across our space, and that's encouraging. That's really truly encouraging to see.
Yeah, in fact, sentiments towards social justice and those issues came across quite strongly, in spite of the fact that I presume the expectation was that young people would be, I guess, knocked off their bearings because of COVID-19. I mean, did that take you by surprise at all, that issues around Black Lives Matter, the NSARS protests you've just mentioned, still had relative prominence in the minds of young people, despite the fact that we're dealing with a global health crisis?
No, absolutely, and I think we've seen it. In South Africa, we've seen it over time. I mean, we've seen fees must fall. Young people going out to the streets, taking their future in their own hands, and making sure that their voice is heard. And that's part of the work that we do. Whether it's the documentaries we do around the People versus Trilogy, which addressed the People versus Patriarchy, which addressed gender equality, Freedom of speech continues to be an important element that impacts young people. We know in our own country that in 1976, young people took to the streets to really create and fight against apartheid. And it's by no surprise that we're seeing young people being a lot more bullish, a lot more positive. In fact, they're holding all of us accountable. I mean, you'll see that in the research shows that 83% of young people across the world expect us as business, as brands, to stand up against social justice. 78%, over the last couple of years, have really been vocal about how they expect brands and they expect industries to really stand up with them in terms of just shaping their narrative and also giving them that hope and that hope for the future.
Yeah, you speak about expectation, accountability, and narratives. Those have really taken center stage in many young activist spaces. You know, the saying "nothing about us without us" type vibe, since we're having a conversation about young people. Speak to me about, how much importance that is now gaining, and perhaps as a brand yourself, how important do you think brands should be taking this? Because I get a sense sometimes young people are kind of, brushed off as going through a phase and not necessarily people to be seriously considered when making decisions in corporate.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen young people, holding brands accountable. They're holding brands accountable for standing up for social justice. We've seen recently, even retailers being taken to task from a racial perspective, making sure that there's, we stand up for the correct racial, just correct racial representation. I think diversity and inclusion has become one of the most key, cornerstones in our society that impacts what we do every single day, whether it's gender activism, whether it's GBV. I mean, I think, the issues of gender-based violence are becoming even more prominent, and it's young people that are standing up, that are taking to social media and using technology and innovation to really put youth activism in the forefront of change. And as brands, we can't ignore that. We have to be, remain connected. We have to make sure that we continue to inspire them and continue to make sure that we give them that platform and voice, to air their views and be part of driving, whether it's economic freedom, whether it's just social justice, etc., gender equality. Young people want change, and as brands, we can no longer just sit back and not act. We have to be authentic and show up, in terms of just giving them those platforms and motivating them to really shape the future that they want to see.
A big critique that's been ventilated over the past few weeks has to do with how prominent figures in sometimes the space of entertainment have responded to the plight of young people in Africa. Black is King by Beyonce, you must know about it. It's been sort of lauded as this symbol of reckoning for specifically young people in the continent. But some people have pointed out how it is those very same people who've kind of co-opted the codes of culture on the continent who don't say much when they need to. And a case in point was during the EndSARS protests, right? So a lot of, if you like, aesthetic from Nigeria is reflected in Beyonce's work, at least in that body of work. But not much was heard from her or her team during a time when young people probably needed her backing. How does that change how young people consume the work that you guys do? I mean, does it even have a bearing on the patterns of consumption that you're seeing, at least insofar as young people are concerned, given what we think they value?
No, absolutely. I think, like I said earlier, it's important for brands to show up. We engage young people almost on an annual basis, to kind of look at these, these surveys. What they do is they really give you the the essence and the zeitgeist of the current mindset in which young people are thinking, key issues, and as brands, like I said, I think it's very important that we show up, that we listen, that we react, and you're seeing this in the whole narrative. I mean, you go across the continent and you'll hear many young people talking to their plight, but also bringing solutions. And I think that's for me has what has encouraged us and has come out in terms of the level of active citizenship that we're seeing with young people across South Africa, across the other 15 countries where we did the research, the levels of creativity and how technology is really giving them that an impetus to really be expressive. And all of that means that, we have to really connect authentically. And I'm seeing an amazing future and very optimistic about how young people are going to be driving, industry, driving business, and driving change, and so being socially conscious. The essence of umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu and how we are all connected is really starting to come across in terms of the social activism that we're seeing.
It's an interesting set of circumstances. Thanks so much for coming through and helping us understand what to make of some of those developments. Truly appreciate your time. Monde Twala is Senior Vice President and General Manager at Viacom Network Africa.